So you've probably used Azure or been learning about Azure and thinking about how you can use it in your day to day. But have you ever thought about how people actually use Azure to learn Azure itself? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about here today on this episode of Cloud with Chris. Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you folks for joining another episode here. We've got an excellent episode in the Tales from the Real World series, and we've got another brilliant guest who I am delighted to introduce in a moment. And we're going to be talking about an interesting topic here. I mentioned about people learning Azure and that real theme of learning, but personally, I don't think about education so much. I went to university, I did my education, those days are behind me, but we're all lifelong learners. And we've got a really, really interesting topic today, thinking about how Dr. Keith, who is our guest for today, helps veterans transition into IT and learn Azure. So a really interesting topic about using Azure to learn Azure and getting people to build up those skills to really move across industries and grow their skill set. So a great topic, really looking forward to this one. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Dr. Keith onto the show. And hello, Dr. Keith. How are you doing?
Chris, how are you doing? It's good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
No, you're very welcome. I'm so pleased to have you on the show. I've been really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be some interesting insights to learn. And like I said, as we were prepping to go live here, we'll see where we go. We'll see where we end up here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I do appreciate your intro and the fact that I help, veterans transition into the civilian sector, and that's really a challenge. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. So I guess that's a little teaser there already about who you are, but let's maybe expand on that for the folks who don't know who you are yet here.
Okay. Dr. Keith, most people know me by Dr. Keith or Dr. M. So I have been a college professor for more than a dozen years. I would push it closer to 15. And so I've taught at the community college, and university levels.
Mm-hmm.
And most recently, my career focus or my focus has been a very special and unique skill bridge program that focuses on that very thing, helping military veterans transition out of the military and into the civilian sector and into Windows Server and Azure Cloud.
Awesome. And I guess that's quite a shift, right, for those folks because, serving, I guess, in the military is obviously very different to kind of building IT systems and working with technology. So how did you, I guess, arrive at that kind of program and arrive at really doing that to start with?
Well, it's a really unique backstory. So a long, long time ago in a galaxy not so far away, Microsoft did some data analysis. And I guess this is just specific here to the States, that the data reads that 500,000 IT jobs go unfilled every year.
Wow.
And that's quite a number. And this has been going on at least for 10 years or so. And what the incentive was to mitigate, to drop that number. So Microsoft developed this program. It's called the Microsoft Software and Systems Academy, or abbreviated MSSA. And they partnered with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University to kind of build this program.
Sure.
And from that, we taught the Microsoft curriculum, and we taught Windows Server, and we taught Azure Cloud, and we did it rather successfully.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that's kind of the backstory.
Yeah. And I guess, it sounds like this is an ongoing thing as well. So you have different cohorts coming through the program then, I'm guessing.
We actually focused our attention on military bases, all the way from Virginia to Hawaii. And so, yeah, we had up to, I think, last count was we had 13 or 14 cohort groups.
Wow.
And so it was really thriving. And so once the word got out and the success of the program got out, and Microsoft continues to do this,
Hmm.
we're no longer partnered with Embry-Riddle, but Microsoft continues to run the program on their own. It's for scalability purposes, but the success of the program was in such a way that we were not only getting military veterans jobs,
Mm.
but really kind of changing their whole focus and
Yeah.
their, I guess, their hope for the future is what we kind of call it, because that's a stressful,
Yep.
vulnerable position to be in, is leaving one job, whether it's 4 years or 14 years or 24 years,
Hmm.
doesn't matter. Transitioning out of one job, especially the military, very structured, and then going into a civilian workforce, we're not so structured.
Yeah.
Wow, I
Yeah.
can imagine. Well, I
And
can imagine. I was there a long, long time ago.
sure. Ah, okay. So you got that background as well. Got it.
I
That
do.
makes sense. And I was just going to say before you mentioned that segue there that the understanding that I get from folks I've spoken to who've been in the military is almost like it's a cliff, right? You're kind of in the military and suddenly, hold on, what do I do next? You feel almost abandoned and feel almost this sense of lost in a
Mhm.
sense of where do I go? What do I do? And, I think that easing that transition with the program you've mentioned is really, really awesome. So kudos to you, kudos to all the folks that are involved in that, because I think a really, really worthy program by the sounds of it. So really great to hear about that.
Well, good, good. Um, when I was in the Corps, and this was again long, long time ago,
Mm,
my first job out of the Marine Corps was an ice cream salesman. So,
awesome.
um, come, well, I don't know, it wasn't the best job in the world, but
Mm,
coming forward 25 years, and now, we're actually in the age where skill bridge programs really do exist. There's
mm,
transition assistance programs for that very purpose, and there are a bunch of, I guess, support groups out there just kind of help. Uh, for one, the military person coming out, whether male or female, coming out into the civilian sector, and then their families. Everybody
yep.
needs to be supported, and so having that opportunity to not only either relearn or improve upon or learn something new specific to, IT or the cloud, and then gaining not only just the technical skills, but also how to write a resume, how to talk to your future employer, how to use LinkedIn
Yep.
and how to network appropriately. And so all of those key pieces, those core essential pieces to making that transition and making it successfully, are all in place. And so, there's lots of pieces to the puzzle.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned about some of those softer skills as well, because I think, and again, I don't have the military background, so this is me almost hypothesizing and empathizing a little to some of the things you've said, is even just to basic communication, things are very different in the military compared with the real world. So really, you
Mhm.
are learning from that very, very low level all the way up in terms of that skill set and how to almost, as you say, transition from that military space into the civilian space. So I guess when we think about things like learning styles, for example, and ways that you kind of teach, and maybe not so much the technical side for now, we can come back to that in a bit, but
Sure.
are there common themes, common things that you kind of see that work well, for example? How does that play out?
Well, again, going back to, and we could start with, what do we mean by the military? And so
Sure.
we know very structured elements, standard operating procedures.
Hmm.
If I'm going to tell you how to do something, it's because it's written in a book.
Yep.
There's a manual for it. You just follow the manual. And so getting aside from the technicalities of the teaching experience, what students are given an opportunity to learn is to quite literally think, and having to think, because there's no more, there may be a manual, going into the employment sector. Of course, if there's been a problem and, people in the IT department already know I've done this before,
Yep.
they're going to follow a specific procedure, but not every IT problem has a pre-identified solution. And so
Indeed.
part of that is having them think about
Mm.
what the problem is, and then having them think not only about what technology will solve that problem, but what is the problem in its relation to the business operations, and what's the problem related to everybody who's at stake in the business. And so there's a broader scope here, and there's definitely that having so the technical instruction plus the soft skills training really need to get our military personnel to kind of think, and I hate to use the cliche think outside the box, but we
Mhm.
have to get them to learn how to think. And so for me, just getting to do that, I use project-based learning methodologies. And
Mm.
so that's kind of my standard on how to approach the classroom, because it talks about, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. We're going to find out how to find those answers from a variety of sources. And probably most importantly, we're going to collaborate. We're going to learn how to work together in teams. And not that they don't know already how to do that, but everybody has their specific role.
Yep.
Well, what if I didn't give you a role? You've got to assume certain responsibilities and be accountable for your team members. And so that really becomes a new thing in the
Mhm.
classroom
Mhm.
for these veterans. Yeah.
Sure. And there was so much you said in there that really resonates with some of the things that we've had on the show previously, areas that I'm super passionate about. Something we regularly talk about on the show here is about the importance of requirements. Technology is great, sure, but technology is there to solve some kind of problem. And coming back to the point you made about the business stakeholders, the wider stakeholders that you'll have, you always need to come back to that kind of problem statement almost, in terms of we're here to solve this business process or this challenge or whatever it may be. And
Hmm.
I love the fact that it's grounded in that. I love the fact it's grounded in this project based approach as well, because I'm a big advocate of there's so much theory out there, and theory is great. There's always time for theory,
Right.
but you've got to be able again to solve that business problem by putting it into practice. And I think it all just comes together in that neat little package then when you start kind of throwing people together, going, right, now go work together and work on that.
Well, I'll be honest, we don't just throw people together. I got to strategize that as well.
Sure,
But
sure.
I perfectly get the idea that, you know, because, and it occurs in stages. And I've
Mm,
talked with my colleagues about this who are in the same kind of situation that I'm
hmm
in that how do we strategize that process? And so we may actually have them just work with one or two other people
mm,
and eventually grow that team a little bit larger.
sure.
And then at some point, maybe assign roles and responsibilities. I'll make somebody, or they'll appoint somebody as kind of the leader. And it was kind of funny because in the classroom, I immediately take away rank,
Right.
because we're coming in there with lots of different ranks, lots of different experiences, even in IT. I've had Marines in the classroom who had 5 or 6 years of IT
Right.
experience, and that's what
Right.
they did. And so, well, that's really good, but that's not going to mean that you're going to lead a team every time.
Yep.
The only person who has rank in my classroom is me.
Yep. Yep.
And sometimes I even take that rank away because I say this is going to be a journey. This is going to be a process. We're going to learn together. We're going to dig deep, and we're going to figure out what's going on, and then we're going to talk about first, what is the business situation? And everything is wrapped in story. And so even when I came on your show, I said, well, there's a backstory to that. I was a Marine at one time, and my first job was ice cream salesman. And
Yep.
I had to find that job. There was no transitional component there. And
Sure.
so for me, having the experience to know the frustration and the fear of kind of moving from this point to another point, a point of unknown, uh, you know, being that leader in the classroom, I took that job seriously. And so we're going to go through a process. I'm going to put you in teams. We're going to figure out how to do this. We're going to touch the technology, and please don't be afraid to break it because it's going to break. And that's even a
hmm
learning lesson too. Uh, we, sometimes you want things to break because we want them to learn how to fix it, because we haven't even talked about troubleshooting yet. And I know you wanted to talk about, just kind of the educational process.
Mm.
And there's a whole lot of balance between, the thinking and about what's going on, and then thinking about what technology is going to solve the problem. So
Sure. No, excellent.
there's a lot of scopes here for just being in the classroom.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe let's touch on the troubleshooting piece then, because you mentioned it
Okay.
there. I think it's a good segue. So, yeah, talk to us more about that then. So you've got the process of the kind of learning and the project-based side of it. Things don't always go right. We know that. How do you kind of
Well,
educate on that side?
we could easily talk about everything was virtual because the classroom was virtual.
Sure.
And we actually did use a Zoom classroom, which was more to my liking. And I have nothing against Teams
Sure.
and nothing against Microsoft. But what we did is, look at virtual machines,
Mhm.
and virtual machines sit on a piece of hardware, and hardware can break, and things don't always transition from point A to point B. But
Mm.
I think my best talk on troubleshooting is Azure, because that was kind of what you did. This is all about cloud, and so let's talk cloud a little bit.
Mm.
Uh, Azure Cloud is a great tool. However, it doesn't always work the way you want it to. But
Yep.
that's always typical with technology.
Hmm.
And part of that may be because of this type of subscriptions. We get student subscriptions, and they're
Right.
free.
Right.
And so not everything's going to work. Two, because we were, and I'll give the experience of the past year and a half
Sure.
with the pandemic. Microsoft pushed a lot of the Azure resources for business use. And so even though they recognized that a lot of people were learning to use Azure as a student,
Mm.
Not just in the programs that they design, but they've got free student accounts for anybody who
Sure.
wants to sign up with it was part of a collegiate system, or even a K-12 system,
Mm.
that your resources are going to be limited, and they may not always work well. Um, and so, that's going to be part of your learning experience. Okay. And even if I were to give kind of the sequence of steps, how to set up a virtual machine, really standard. You've got to pick the size and the operating system and where it is and what resource group it's in, and all those kind of, what virtual network it's going to be in. And even if I were to give very specific, even to the name, you're going to name it, this is going to be an IIS system, web server.
Mm.
Not every student's going to follow those instructions to the T. So that
Yep.
was kind of funny as well.
Yep.
And so if it didn't deploy correctly, well, it didn't, Dr. McNally, it didn't deploy correctly. So
Okay.
I followed, and I'll get that, right?
Yeah.
It's not working. I can't get in it.
Hmm.
Um, so I said, well, let's go back. And so I've got two phrases that I always use with my students.
Mm.
First, plan first, deploy second.
Right.
Plan first and deploy second. So let's plan it out. Let's go back to the plan. I've already set up the sequence of events. This was my teaching them how to plan out a deployment. And I'm going to add three. Obviously, we got to test the deployment after we actually execute it. So it's plan, deploy, and test, right? Let's follow those three steps, because one, it's all brand new. None of my students have ever touched cloud. So going into the portal, spinning up a
Sure.
VM or installing a server role, these are, and then, logging in either through secure shell or, setting up remote desktop,
Hmm.
brand new experiences. And so for the first time that they did it and did it successfully, it was like a whole new world. It was like,
Hmm.
wow, this is really cool. But
Awesome.
when it doesn't work, it becomes really, really frustrating. And
Yeah.
so, let's talk about how do we troubleshoot something that you know very little about. Let's follow the steps.
Mm. Yeah, that's tough, isn't it? You're trying to treat those, or rather teach those troubleshooting skills for almost trying to find a needle in a haystack, but you don't know where all the haystacks are yet, kind of thing.
All right.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
Azure Cloud is really cool that it gives you that structure. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're there, what's this drop down menu? What's the next drop down menu? What's the next drop? So the only way that, we always say, well, where's the error at? Well, it was user error, was it not? So, not
Sure.
to kind of point fingers, but just to say, let's kind of slow it down, breathe in, breathe out,
Hmm.
and then kind of see where we are, and then figure out, why it didn't work the way, one, it should have worked, or two, the way you expected it to work. And so
Gotcha. Oh,
there's
awesome.
there's a, there's a lot of that. And I think when students, especially, of course, and we're going to talk transitioning military,
Mm.
when they gain that experience, then they can breathe a little bit easier. They could take that deep breath, and says, wow, okay, I can do this. And then once they can do one small thing, they can do the next small thing, and
Yep.
it's not so scary a
Yeah.
process.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And just checking, by the way, are you good for time? Are you good to
Oh
continue on?
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Good. Because I know it
I'm
was my bad.
expecting I'm expecting Walmart to deliver my food, but they're already 3 hours late, so I'm
Oh,
not
there
sure
we
if we're
go.
gonna get.
No, it was my bad. I was just saying over email, wasn't I, that we're kind of day one here in the UK of opening up, and traffic was a little chaotic. So getting
All
back
good.
was a challenge. So apologies for that, but good. We can carry on the discussion. So I guess then we've talked a bit here about the technologies and talk about virtual machines and more infrastructure type of things so far. Is that kind of the type of focus typically, is more the infrastructure side? Do you get folks who get inspired and want to go maybe more with the apps or the data? What do you kind of see after that, almost that foundational building block stage, I guess?
So the program was specific to two 9-week blocks, and so the
Mm,
first 9-week block was Windows Server, and
cool.
so that builds kind of the infrastructure of, if we were in somebody's building, if you were in a building, what would it look like? Even virtually, what would it look like? Because you could run a complete, build on Hyper-V, on hypervisor, on
Mm,
Hyper-V, and then once we get those ideas down, we spent another 9 weeks in the cloud. And
yep.
so a lot of that, and it was specific to Azure AZ 104. So it was
Mm,
specific to a curriculum.
sure.
And so we did 104, and then we did some 301. But there was a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of build in the infrastructure.
Mm,
So, and we do that in very specific ways. So we learn how to build virtual machines, of course.
mm,
We learn how to run roles. Server roles on these virtual machines.
sure.
We learn how to connect them. We learn how to build virtual networks. We learn how to build VNet peering, global VNet peering. So, the build. So we start small. Of course,
Mm,
we start very small. Can this virtual machine talk to that virtual machine, and how? Um, and so we talk about, the ping command and the trace route command, and
mhm,
so we're doing it all over again, but in a real virtual space. And then they really, and at first it's like a game, because, well, where is this data center, and how do I know it's really real versus it being a simulator, right?
yep.
Because we spend a lot of time, students spend a lot of time in simulators. So if
Sure.
you're running a simulator, the simulator is going to work because the app is designed to do a certain thing.
Mm,
Um, this is the real cloud. This is really Azure. This is a real virtual machine. This is something that you can actually use. And
mm,
so it's not, they don't get that. Most of them don't get that like the first week, but after a while, they're thinking, wow, this is my subscription. This is my virtual machine. This is my network.
yep.
And so they do. So once we get that comfort level up, exactly like you said, some of it they do get to explore, they will get to explore on their own. And so what Microsoft does offer is they've got a whole section of their Microsoft area where you can study case studies, Azure case studies. There's like 2,000 case studies from when the onset was, 10 years ago to
Mm,
even most recently, a couple months ago. And so how is Azure being used by businesses
mm,
internationally, all over the world? What are they using? Infrastructure? Are they using applications? Are they using platform? Are they developing games? that's a whole area in and of itself.
Mm.
And then I would go back and apply, project learning methods. And I have four very specific projects, and this past cohort was really good at it. And so, I'm not sure so I'm gonna say it. So every February in the state of Florida, there's what we call the Sea to Sea adventure race. Okay. It's a 72-hour adventure race,
Okay.
and it goes from West Coast Florida, the Atlantic Ocean, hopefully got my geography right, all the way to the Gulf. So we're going from one side of Florida to the other side of Florida. And I use this as kind of a model. And what the business situation is, you've got to live stream it. Well, hypothetically,
Sure.
you have to learn how to live stream the 72-hour events through Azure. Right?
Interesting.
Azure Cloud. So we do it in both the first 9 weeks, because we hypothetically talk about it. If I'm going to give each team 5 vans.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you any equipment that you think is necessary, cost on, not regarding cost. And so your job as small teams is to figure out how to run local hotspots, once we get to that point, local
Sure.
hotspots, and we will live stream the 72-hour race. Once we get to Azure, Azure has Azure Media Services.
Mm-hmm.
So we could live stream an event. They just have to learn how to do it. And so same concept, same race. Now they could have the 5 vans if they still need it, but now you've got to show proof of concept, because now we're using a real tool. And so we're not taking a field trip to Florida, so it wasn't all about that. And, because it being virtual, some of us were everywhere, so we were not taking a field trip to Florida. So proof of concept was use Azure Media Services and live stream something for 30 seconds. It could be your cat, it could be your dog, it could be whatever going on in your neighborhood or whatever it is. Doesn't really matter. And so they actually have to use the tool.
Awesome.
So it's not specific to the curriculum, but it was very specific to understanding business situations.
Yep.
And how to use Azure as a tool to solve that business situation. And so that's one of 4 that I like to use. And it works really, really well, because I kind of leave my hands off. I said, you know how to do this. You know the expectation. You can choose your own team members. And I'm going to give you 3 days to learn how to use Azure Media Services.
Sure.
And they've got to do the reading, they've got to do the testing, and they've got 3 or 4 other students to kind of lean on and kind of go back and forth with. And
that's awesome.
Sure. Yeah.
And
I even tell them, I said, get on the phone, call the people who run C2C adventure race. Get on the phone. And a couple of students did, so that they could get an idea of what the business's perspective of the business situation is versus what an outsider's perspective of the business situation is. So I encourage that. I encourage them to kind of make those connections.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love all of that. Like, again, going back to what I said earlier, like that whole requirements piece, the whole, I guess we touched on the troubleshooting now, that idea that you need to figure out how some of this stuff works. You may not know it. I'm sure many people listening into the show right now, or at least when it goes out live, are thinking, yeah, I've had to do that so many times where there's a technology that I don't quite know, and I've got a customer call in a few days and I need to learn all of this stuff.
Right.
Understanding how you apply it to the business problem, all of these things. I love how real of a solution that is, and a scenario that is. So yeah, really interesting one. Really like that. And I guess we've got to talk about it as well, because we talked about it just before we went live. You've got some really interesting things on the walls behind you as well. You've got
it's all Lego.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Well, these are the white and the red. These are Lego Ninjago Mets for the 2021 season. This is the Lego Mindstorms bot, the basic bot build. So that's all it is. Down here is a basic Lego camper. And my really favorite is this guy right here. So this is actually 2 builds in one. And so Lego did something unique Lego has two. Well, now they've got three. This is the 31313 Mindstorms product, and now they've got the 51515 product, which is a little bit different.
Mm.
But they also have like kind of a scaled down bot build, and it's called Lego Boost.
Mm.
And it runs for about $160, I think, off the shelf price. And it's a basic, bot build. It's in a big box and all that kind of stuff. But they've integrated it with the Lego Ninjago Stormbringer Dragon. And I'm all about dragons. I've got about 12
Nice.
dragons, 12 Lego dragon builds in my garage.
Cool.
I got them in a home, so they're in a giant box and something I created. Anyway,
Awesome.
the reason I like this dragon so much is because of what they put in the app.
Yeah.
So he could march forward. He could walk forward. He could kind of walk sideways. He could kind of walk in circles. He could walk backwards. And when he walks, his head can turn.
Yeah.
His head can go up and down and turn and do all. And then when he walks, the tail is free swinging, so it'll swing back.
Nice.
And then he's got two shooters that come out of his mouth. But and if there's any kids that watch this, and I've got my own YouTube channel, and so I've got a real short demonstration. But he can cluck like a chicken for reasons unknown. He could cluck like a chicken, and for all the guys out there, he can fart. And so there's actually a button that. We can do that as well, and so
all the functionality that is needed.
So he's the most fun app to kind of play with, even as a toy, but definitely as a tool to learn from.
But I guess the angle I was going there, thinking specifically of the one on your right, I think the one with the wheels there. Yeah, exactly. had to think from your perspective then, not my right.
Yeah,
right.
Right here. That's the basic Mindstorms bot.
Yeah.
And so for anybody who's a fan of Lego Mindstorms, this is easily 10 years old, and this is the basic build, and that kind of introduces, because there's sensors and there's controls, there's motor controls, and so all that kind of builds on itself at a very introductory level. And so it's not by no means a robot operating system. It is the Mindstorms operating system using the intelligent brick, and so it's very academic in nature versus engineering in nature.
Because where my mind went, yeah, no, absolutely, and where my mind went thinking about the robotics angle of what you do as well, whether there's almost an Internet of Things perspective to that as well at some point. Is that something you've explored at all with any of these?
We actually not with these, but with the Raspberry Pi.
Gotcha.
That's actually one of my other assignments, PBL assignments I did with my class. Is we actually learned how to use IoT, the IoT hub. All right.
Yeah, we got a little cluster
we
here
actually
of Raspberry
learned how
Pis.
to use the IoT. Okay, and so you very much are familiar with that. And so what I actually had them do is I've got behind this wall. There's actually a robot, the GoPi Go robot.
Nice.
And so they had to actually log into that from wherever they were in the world. And so we opened up port 22. They logged in to the bot from wherever they were virtually, and they got to turn it on and on, make it go left and right. And so all of that is part of the functionality of the classroom. But that's not specific to the curriculum, but of course they're going to need to learn how IoT and the IoT hub works, and working with sensors, and just being able to do that.
Awesome. No, any opportunity to geek out, I know we had to get those definitely into the channel here. It'd be wrong of us to have you on the show and not talk about the awesome background you got there. So, no, excellent. Thank you, Keith. So I guess
I appreciate it.
Thinking, just maybe starting to wrap us up a little bit here. Thinking about all of those cohorts that you have taken through the program, and inevitably the many different scenarios, been through all the things that have been learned along the way, what are maybe some of those moments that stand out? And for anyone who, whether they have that military background transitioning into a civilian career, or even just picking up cloud, maybe they've worked in IT and they're starting to learn cloud, or they're not even from IT, they thought this cloud thing sounds interesting. Maybe I should take a go at it. What are maybe some of your wise words of what you've seen of the cohorts going through the program? What should they consider as part of their own learning?
I think being open-minded, and we really want them to learn how to think. And so going back to that, and that's really scary. And it's scary because when you're in the military, and this is just that population, when you're in the military and you're told when to get up, when your job is, what your job's going to do, how you do your job, you do it, you get paid, you do it again the next day. And then somebody's saying, well, what happens if? What happens if this were to break and you were the only person on duty and your boss was on vacation? What happens if we get a new client and the client says, well, this kind of works, but I need it to do this as well. What do you suggest? And so as soon as they receive those words, what do you think, which is what's going to happen in the civilian world, what do you think about this? Or do you think this is going to work? Or would you plan this out for me? Or even better yet, can you brief this on can you, I'm going to give you something and you got 2 days and you got to do the research and then you've got to brief the management team. Oh my goodness.
It's an alien world. Yeah.
A lot of the students that went through the program didn't have that kind of experience. And so to brief, a higher level officer or whatever, well, I never did that. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we got to do it now.
Yep.
And so they did it with me. And so I had them really focus on, in teams of 3 or 4, be able to give the presentation, be able to talk about what it is that you've learned, and not just say, well, I learned a lot. Well, tell me what you actually learned. Tell me what you can actually do. And then, of course, like I said, with the PBL experiences, you're going to show me. But it's also about communicating what you know how to do. So it's not just about doing it, but it's learning how to talk the language. Talk like an IT person, but talk like somebody who can think that you can solve a problem, and then show me that you can solve it. And so that's kind of really what has to be reinforced, especially with this population who doesn't have that experience. But again, we could open that to, high school or middle school or whatever. You have to not just be able to do something, but you have to be able to communicate to somebody what it is you're doing and how it actually works. And sometimes you can do something, but telling somebody that you can do something is another skill altogether, because you get afraid. What if I screw up? What if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? Well, the classroom is a good place to practice. The classroom is a great place to practice. So this way, if you get it wrong, you know what you did wrong. You'll learn from it. And then when you get back to get out into the real world, you'll do it right.
And probably most importantly as well.
So that's kind of my 2 cents. Yeah.
Nice. I was just going to say, probably most importantly as well is realizing you don't always need to have the answer as well. I guess for that population, like you mentioned there, being able to take action immediately and act upon whatever scenario has been given is going to be quite almost an impulse that has been trained and nurtured there. So to also instill that as well and say, actually, you can kind of say, I'll get back to you, or we'll come back to that. It is okay. These kind of things we sometimes take for granted. So yeah, it's really, really interesting when we start exploring that mind shift change that has to happen there. Gotcha. Excellent. So
Absolutely.
As we start wrapping up here, Dr. Keith, is there anything at all that's top of mind that you want to kind of leave folks with who are listening in here?
Well, that's a real big open-ended question. That's something I would ask my students. And so really it's, can I just say, if you need to get in touch with me, if you want to get in touch with me,
sure.
You can find me on YouTube or my website, drkeithmcnally.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. And so, LinkedIn, Dr. Keith McNally, just connect and say, hey, you saw me on Chris's show, and I would love to connect with you. And I'm open to always open to connections.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, Dr. Keith, thank you so much, or Dr. M as well, I think you mentioned earlier. Thank you so much for
all good.
really interesting and insightful session here. I think what I've loved about this one is, again, without any coordination, I always like to bring this up when we talk about it on the show, is that basis of requirements, that basis of soft skills, which is so important to really working with customers, really working with organizations, because technology is great. We all love technology, and wouldn't it be awesome if we could all just play with technology all day? That's not the world we live in, right? We have to solve these problems. We're there to solve these challenges, and I love the program and the work you're doing. So thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate it.
So there we go, folks. We have been learning all about, well, you've heard it all there, folks. It's been a journey, hasn't it? Looking at how Dr. Keith and the program that is being operated there goes ahead and helps veterans transition from the world that they've been in with the military into the civilian world of IT, and lots of shifts to be made, not just learning the technology, but also some of those things that you and we just take for granted. So again, when we think about a show that was on, I think, a few weeks ago now, with Melissa Jerkois, talking all about dimensions of diversity, thinking about these different backgrounds that people are from and what we've all got to learn and teach each other is so important, especially in the world that we're in today. So do bear that in mind. Do think how you could potentially help others along that journey as well, and what you need from others to go and help along your own journey. So with that, folks, you know the deal. If you have liked the session, please do go ahead, hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Not just on Cloud with Chris, but you heard it from Dr. Keith himself. He has his own YouTube channels there as well, website and LinkedIn. Please do go ahead and support there as well. So with that, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next one, thanks for watching, and bye for now.